When we clap at our church, unlike when you go to a concert or something and you're applauding and you're sort of affirming the people on the platform, at our church when we applaud, we're really giving thanks to God for what He is doing in the room among us, and we're thanking the people who lead us there. See, part of what we do here every week is we celebrate. Of course we do that. And part of what we do here every week is we say hi to friends we haven't seen. And yes, we get into the Bible for some practical teaching that's relevant to all of our lives. Of course we do that, but make no mistake about it, there is nothing we do that's more important as a church than sitting and standing shoulder to shoulder together as our hearts collide into a single voice toward heaven with words like hallelujah. I could sing these songs as I often do. Every song must end. You never do. I've got one response. I've got just one move. With my arms outstretched wide, I will worship you. There is nothing we do here that's more important than that. I've been thinking about important things. I've been thinking about the most important things, reflecting on that a bit lately. Let me invite you to do that with me briefly. Just for your own thought, what is the most important thing you've ever done in your life? Don't say it out loud. Just ponder it for a second. What is the most important thing you've ever done in your life? It's hard to do, isn't it? What I mean is it's hard to choose, because unless you did something like cured cancer or ended world hunger, there are several important things that you've done. And it's really hard to select one and make it the thing that's on the top of the list. So I just think about me. Maybe this will help you reflect on your own life. I think, the day Susan changed her last name from Payne to Hughes, that was pretty big for me. It was monumental, really. It was important. And the day I became a dad, and a dad again, and a dad again, really important. The launching of our church and the lives that have been changed through the years, really important. And you've got some of these too. They'll be different, but there are several things. The point is there's more than one. So asking for you to make something rise to the very top, that's hard. It might be impossible. But when Pastor Angie asked a few of us teaching pastors to teach on the fire in my bones, that thing that burned inside of us, I had the benefit of reflection, because I've been doing this for a long time now. I first started preaching sermons in small churches in 1998, and thankfully, people back then didn't have sort of video options on your cell phone, because I assure you, there was nothing redeemable in my early work. You're welcome. But along the way of 27 years of teaching about how God intersects with the realities of our complicated lives, there are a few recurring themes that I would argue rise to the top of the importance ladder, for me anyway. And I've had some time to reflect on this. I thought, what would be on the top of my list of the things that I've taught? Marriage. I love teaching about marriage. I love teaching about what God designed, what He wants for your marriage now or your future marriage, and how you get to it, how you can actually achieve it. You can have it. And I love teaching about parenting. I'm passionate about being a dad and now a papa. And I love talking about how, looking at the truths in the Bible, how God calls us to move through the various phases of rearing our kids and how we approach it in a different way so that we can successfully get our kids to adulthood. I love talking about fruit, how you can have love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control as a function of allowing God, who God is, to affect who you are. FYI, those things are not just a random list. They are the 9 components of what we call the fruit of the Spirit found in the Bible. I love teaching about forgiveness, the thing you get from God, the thing you're supposed to give to others. And I love talking about grace and compassion and sacrifice and selflessness. These are some of the things that I've taught that I would put on my short list. But if you asked me to name one thing, just one thing, it's easy for me, actually. It's the entire message of the love of God towards you and me, captured in 8 simple words. There was a man who had 2 sons. Now, this is a story you might think you know. Maybe you recognize it from this, and you'll recognize it probably in a minute if you don't now. But for us today, for many of us, there's a surprise in the story that we don't realize. Because those of us who've heard the story usually just focus on one son. But there were how many? There were 2. How many of you, look, we don't put people on the spot at our church. We don't single you out, but this will be a non-threatening question. So I want you to raise your hand at every campus. I want you to raise your hand if you have siblings. You are not an only child. There you go. So it's a lot of us, right? So any story, if you have siblings, any story that begins the way Jesus sets this one up, and he's the one telling this story, it already has those of us who are not an only child. We're already involved. Because anybody who grew up with a brother or sister knows what's coming with a sentence like this. There's a comparison on the way. I mean, isn't it one of life's great unsolved mysteries? How 2 children can grow up in the same home, under the same conditions, in the same culture, with the same parents, in the same time frame, with the same values, and end up anything but the same. I have 3 brothers, but there's only one I really grew up with. My brother Jeremy, who's just 3.5 years younger than me. We're pretty close in age and different in every other way. I was the skinny, non-athletic kid who loved people, loved books, loved school, and could pretty much hold my own in any conversation from the time I could talk. Oh yeah, and I believed that rules were meant to be followed. My brother Jeremy was the complete opposite. He was solid muscle from the second he came out of the womb. He was naturally athletic, and the only thing he hated more than school was rules. So when Jesus opens up a story like this, there was a man who had 2 sons, I'm immediately thinking about me and my brother. And you don't have to be a biblical scholar to see that a comparison is on the horizon just by the way Jesus begins the story. I have an expectation that one son is good and the other one is not. And it certainly begins that way. There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth, the wealth that came from his dad, in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. What this means is he was hungry. So at first glance, it's really easy to miss. This parable, this is a parable. It's a fictitious story intended to reveal a spiritual truth. And Jesus gave it 2,000 years ago in another language. We had to span time and culture. And so when we read it, it's really easy to miss how lethal this moment is. This is the climax of this son's rebellion, and it is the worst kind of family meltdown you can imagine. Now, if you're a parent, you probably had some turmoil with your kids as they were growing up or are growing up, and maybe you had to navigate into adulthood with some turmoil, or maybe you did that as you were a kid growing up yourself. So, things like maybe there was a door that got slammed, or more than one. Maybe there was a tear or 2, or lots of them. Maybe some unkind words were spoken, maybe some cussing, maybe a little bit of name calling. I've certainly experienced some of those things as a parent when my kids were growing up, and I did a few of those, I'm sure, as a kid to my parents. But this is not that. This is far worse than that. When he says, "Father, give me my share of the estate," that by itself was unusual, but not unheard of. Sometimes in this era, an estate would be distributed while the father was still living. But here's the key. In that situation, the dad would still have a life right to use the assets. So in essence, it was sort of like naming everything in the will, but dad still got to use it until he was gone. In this case, though, the son takes those assets, liquidates them, and leaves with the money. So this isn't just the son saying, I'm moving out, I'm moving on, I'm leaving. This is the son saying to his father, literally, I can't wait for you to be dead. In essence, he's saying to his father, I disown you. I disown how you raised me. I disown everything you believe in. I disown my place as your son. It is total disrespect for everything the father stands for. I want you to grasp the magnitude of this moment. It is a flagrant rejection of the father's household and his values and his care for his son and his work and his life and his love, everything. So the son takes his newly granted riches and he walks away from his brokenhearted dad and he heads to the distant country. Henry Nouwen, a scholar that I follow, says the distant country is the world in which everything considered holy at home is disregarded. Can you imagine yourself in the younger son? Many people can. And many people think that this kind of departure is permanent, that this kind of family wound is just not able ever to be repaired. I mean, how can a son or a daughter who does this to their father ever come home? If you're asking that question, I just want you to hang on, hold that thought. So only after the younger son reaches like a place of total desperation, like he's literally hungry, does he start to experience some regret. So after that, he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that distant country who sent him to his field to feed pigs. I just want to note here, Jesus is speaking at least in part to a Jewish audience. And to Jewish people, a pig is a detestable animal, completely unclean. Not only would you not eat pork, but you wouldn't be anywhere near a pig. So he's sent to the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. And when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out, and I will go back to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And so he got up, and he went to his father. I want to interrupt the text here because, I know what's coming. Maybe you know what's coming. And I believe that the son rehearses this little speech. He rehearses what he's going to say to his dad. Have you ever had to have a hard conversation with somebody and you're really nervous about it? It kind of makes you anxious the closer that conversation gets. Maybe you're an employer and you got to let somebody go, or you have to confess to someone that you did something bad and it's going to hurt them. They're going to be upset with you. Or you got to tell your parent that you flunked a class or flunked out of school, or 1,000 other things that you would just rather run from. But this son has already run. He's got nowhere else to go. And when he realizes that his only option is to go home, he knows he can't just walk in the door and pretend like nothing happened. I mean, remember, he said to his father, I wish you were dead. So he's got to say something, and he chooses his words carefully. Probably tries a few different versions of the speech, and he finally settles on this one. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. I think that during the entire trip home, which lasted at least a few days, maybe a few weeks, because remember, he went to a distant country, I think he's practicing this speech the whole time. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm not worthy to be called your son. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And I think he's figuring out along the way, at least this is how I would do it, like you got to figure out which words to emphasize. Father, I've sinned. No. Father, I've sinned against, no. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. And he keeps saying it. He keeps saying it over and over again. He's practicing, he's getting it down, and then he realizes, home's right there. I'm almost there. This is not rehearsal anymore. His breathing gets shallow. I can feel his anxiety going up. His heart begins to race. This conversation is coming now. How will his father hear him? What will his dad do? Will he reject him? Will he send him off? Will his dad look at him and say, you wanted me dead to you, now you're dead to me. Get out. The son doesn't know. He doesn't know how his dad's going to receive him, but Jesus, who's telling us this parable, he's making a point, and he isn't finished yet. So while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son and he threw his arms around him and he kissed him. And the son said to him exactly what he had rehearsed. This is how I know it. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son, but he can't even finish the rest of it because his dad interrupts him and says to the servants, quick, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And so they began to celebrate. Yes, the return of the prodigal. This is the story you might think you've heard before. Maybe you have heard it before. The son treats his own father with disrespect. He runs away to the distant country. He blows a fortune with disdain and comes home in disgrace. The return of the prodigal son. That's what we call this parable, isn't it? It's a phrase that's become a part of our culture now, inside and outside of the church. The return of the prodigal. Maybe you were or still are that son or daughter who finds your place and connects with this story right here. Rebellion and regret are the defining characteristics of your life. And maybe you've been to the distant land that is far away from what you know to be true and right. Maybe that's where you are right now. And if that's you, I want you to hold on. We're coming back to you. But this is not the end of the story. Even though this is usually where we end the story, because remember how Jesus opens this? There was a man who had how many sons? 2. And we've only heard about one of them. And Jesus isn't finished. So the son comes home, they begin to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. You know why the older son was in the field? Because he's the oldest, which means he's working. Because we oldists, we got the brunt of our parents' inexperience, and because they were still idealists when they had us, and because they still had energy to push back if we complained, which we never did, by the way, because we're the oldest. We're the banner bearers, we're the mess cleaner uppers. Maybe you don't see all of that in this single sentence, but that would be because you're not the oldest. Anyway, the older son was in the field, and when he came near the house, he heard the music and the dancing, and so he called one of the servants and he asked him what was going on. Your brother's come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in, so his father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. You never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. So let's just back up a minute. The older brother comes in from the fields. He doesn't know what's happened. He doesn't know that his younger brother's returned. He's just been out there working, like he always does. He's the dedicated employee. He has the strong work ethic. He's been the protector of his father's estate, his right hand. And so he finishes another long, hard day of work, and he heads home and he hears the music and dancing, and there's obviously a party going on that he's not a part of. And I find it interesting that he doesn't just go inside the house and see what all the fuss is about. Instead, he calls a servant and asks the servant for a report. And the servant explains, and it infuriates him. It infuriates him. He is beyond his boiling point, but he doesn't barge into the house and tell his brother what he thinks, and he doesn't barge into the house and tell his father what he thinks. He doesn't return to the fields to go back to work. He doesn't go to his room and call it a day. He just stands there, arms crossed, face showing his anger, pouting, and he's hoping. He's hoping that his father comes out and asks him what's wrong. You ever prepared a speech in your anger, hoping you get the chance to deliver it to your anger's target? I think this son prepares a speech for his dad just like his brother did. And he hopes his dad will ask, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? I'll tell you what's wrong. I worked hard for you my whole life. I slaved for you. I put in long days for you. I protected your assets and your wealth. I even added to it. And how do you reward me for this? You didn't even throw a party for me and my friends and serve cold pizza. But this son of yours takes half of your worth, flushes it down the toilet on despicable acts that you taught us not to do. He spit in your face. He took your money and spent it on things you taught us were detestable. And then he comes home broke, marred by this unspeakable sin. And what do? You restore him to the family. You throw a party and kill the fattened calf for him. Can you hear? Can you hear what he's saying? Can you feel what he's feeling? Of course he's mad because what's happened feels like it's unfair. That we can understand, right? When I was growing up, I told you I loved school. I was a good student. So when I brought a report card home and it had an A- on it, I got interrogated. Brian, you're not doing your best. You're not fully applying yourself. This can be an A+, and you know it. My brother Jeremy would bring home straight D's. We would kill the fattened calf, put a robe on his back and a ring on his finger. None of us appreciates it when something unfair happens. But this is much deeper than that. It's not just a sense of unfairness. He's jealous, he's resentful, he's bitter, and he's insecure. I think his insecurity has morphed itself into self-righteousness. It's ironic to me that we try to hide our insecurity by acts of self-righteousness that make us look confident and very secure. So we work hard and we play by the rules and we do the right thing, which is all good, but often our motive is our own sense of insecurity that we might be left out, that somebody might be loved more. And so we deliberately set ourselves up to look better on the outside. That's what the older son did. He looked good on the outside, he looked good with his actions and his behavior, but in reality, he was just as lost as the son who had openly rebelled. He also left the love of the father, just like his brother did, except he did it without ever leaving home. The insecurity that he had is proven in his conclusion that his dad's love had to be earned. That's what motivated him to work hard, and that's what motivated him to obey his dad. He didn't do those things just because it was the right thing. He didn't do those things just because he loved his father. So ironically, for the older son, work and obedience, which are inherently good things, for him became a form of rebellion. It was a way for him to leave the essence of the goodness and the pure love of home, of his dad. Henry Nouwen says that it's more difficult for the older son to own his lostness than it is for the younger son. It makes sense, doesn't it? When somebody gets mired in open sin, pick your variety, sexual sin, addictions, on and on the list is, it can go. When we're there, when we're far from the Father because we created the distance and it's obvious we've run away, well, it's easy to eventually see what we've done. It's kind of just out there. But the older son leaves the father without ever leaving home. How can I say that? It's evident because he marginalizes his brother. He's not glad to see him. In fact, he asks his father to choose between them. He, in essence, says, it's him or me. If he's in the party, I'm going to stand outside. If he's part of the family, I'm not. If he gets grace, I don't want it. As a matter of fact, he would say, I don't need grace. In fact, I want you to look at the distancing language that he uses when he talks to his dad. He says, when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes, not my brother, but this son of yours. And that's where it gets revealed, his own insecurity. He's saying, for years, I've done the right thing. I should have earned your love by now. I've been trying to set myself up as deserving of your love. I've been trying to show you that I'm more worthy of your love. And I want you to compare the two of us. I want you to put us side by side, and I want you to declare me the righteous son. Deep within his soul, he's so unsure of his father's unconditional love for him that he has to prove that he's worthy of it. Some of us do this by displaying our good behavior, and some of us do it by highlighting other people's poor choices. In this way, we can make a comparison and we can look better. In our eyes and the eyes of people around us, and especially, we think, to God. We do it with those who struggle with drugs and alcohol and addictions and bad behavior and destructive decisions, and we push them aside, and we look at people who've made these incredibly poor decisions in their past that are more obvious than our own, and we say, you don't deserve to be a part of the family. Even though the father is standing on the edge of the field searching for them, we stand in their way because of our insecurity that leads to our sense of self-righteousness. I played by the rules. You strayed. You don't deserve to come home. Nobody ever says that. We would never say something like that. We just act like it. I'm better because I look better, because my actions look better. One of my pet peeves, one of the things I think that often happens is we look at certain kids and we label them as bad kids. We compare them to our good kids, and we push those kids aside, and then we don't allow them to be a part of our lives where our kids and our families can be a positive influence on them and share with them the love they so desperately want, the love that can only come through Jesus. Even though the Father is searching for them too, we stand in the way of their return because of our insecurity that leads to self-righteousness. Let's face it, the younger son comes home, dad welcomes him back, and now he's behaving like an heir, even though he doesn't deserve it. He's lived like the devil, now he lives like a king. And so we draw a line and we say, if the father just lets anybody into this party, well, count me out, I'm better than that. I'll just stand outside. That's insecurity, because you're betting on you being more righteous, but deep inside, somewhere in your soul, you know you're not. Maybe you don't realize it. Let me just say it. You're just as screwed up. You're just as messed up, jacked up, broken as the rest of us. And you also left home, just like the younger son. It's just that you're in denial about it. I know, because I am the older brother. And I thought like that for a long time, I'm ashamed to say. So if this is convicting to you, I get it. But this is the whole of Jesus' story, that there are two sons and both left home. And yet, the real shock of this story is that it isn't about the sons at all. Let's go back to the beginning. There was a man who had two sons. Now, I know that at our church there are a few people who are like, you get super excited about English and grammar. I know, because you send me emails sometimes about a period that I don't put in the right place. And I still do two spaces after the period. I'm just saying that's the right thing to do. Jesus wrote like that, I'm gonna write like that. He didn't really, in case you're wondering. Just don't send me an email. Okay, so anyway, I digress. Okay, so here's a sentence for all you English and grammar people. There was a man who had two sons. Here's a real question, okay? Who's the subject of this sentence? The man, the father. This story is not about the older brother, and it isn't about the younger brother. It's about the dad. You know what the word prodigal means? The word prodigal means lavish. And we often mistake this story. We call it the story of the prodigal son. We think, well, we call him that because he's the one who spent his father's wealth in wild, lavish living. But this story isn't about that. It's about the lavish love that the father has for both of his boys and his desire for both of them to come home. One squandered his father's goodness on blatantly, openly sinful things, and every day the father stood on the edge of the field and waited for him to come home. The other son squandered his father's goodness on an internal battle of comparison and good works. And the father left the party to talk to him, and he said, "Everything I have belongs to you too." See, it doesn't matter how far you have strayed from home. Whether, like the younger son, you participated in open sin that nobody would deny, including you, or like the older son, you left the father by becoming resentful or self-righteous or insecure. All of us can admit that we left home. And all of us can accept the Father's love and be in the family. And when we accept God's love through Jesus Christ, who God sent to get us, then God looks at us through all of the junk, through all of the sin, public and private, through everything. And he sees the son, the daughter that he's always dreamed about. One who is standing now inside the party, one who rejoices when another lost brother or sister is found and comes home. He looks at you, and no matter how ugly you think it is on the inside, he looks at your heart and he says, "You're beautiful to me. You're the child I always wanted. And I don't care what it looks like on the outside. What matters is you were dead, and now you're alive. You were lost, and now you're found." This parable is not about a bad son, and it's not about a son in hiding. It's about a father who is waiting and searching and hoping that every one of his children comes home. All of it wrapped up in 8 most profound words. There was a man who had 2 sons.
I've carried a burden for too long on my own, but I wasn't created to bear it alone. I hear your invitation to let it all go. And I see it now, I'm laying it down. Oh, I know that I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a searching, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. You saw my condition, had a plan from the start. Your son for redemption, the price for my heart. And I don't have a context for that kind of love. I don't understand, I can't comprehend. All I know is I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a searching, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh,
can come home. You don't have to keep hiding. God's grace is available to you right now. There is no reason to wait. You don't have to get your life together first. You don't have to get it all figured out first. That's kind of the point. God has already been waiting for you to come home. That can happen anytime, including right now. So if you feel God calling you home, pulling you back, let me pray for you. Can I pray with you? Would you pray something similar to this with me? God, thank you for the lavish love that you pour on us. Lord, I know I've been gone too long. I know I've strayed and felt like I couldn't make my way back. But Lord, I know now that you've been waiting. You've been waiting for me to come back. So God, here I come. Here I am. Lord, wrap me up in your open arms. God, I am ready to come home and stay home for the rest of my life, God. Thank you for loving me. I love you. Amen. If you prayed a similar prayer to that today, to be embraced by the lavish love of the Father, then we celebrate with you right now. And in just a moment, we're going to help you with your next step. But part of that celebration, let's continue to sing this song together, celebrating God's love in your journey home. Let's sing.
My heart has been in your sight long before my first breath, running into your arms is running to life from death. And I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out, and just as I am, you pull me in, and I know I need you now. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart found a surgeon, my soul found a friend. And so I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Again and again and again and again.
My heart found a surgeon, my soul found a friend. What a beautiful thing you and I can experience today. Each of us, whether you're the younger or the older brother, can come home to God. As I said, if you did that today, you are invited to be a part of the celebration for you anytime a lost child comes home. So this space is yours. You're welcome to stay here to pray or to talk to somebody if you'd like. A few of us are going to be up here, but anybody with a name tag on that you see, if you want to talk about this decision you made, we want to hear about it. But you can also submit a Connect card, and someone on our team will contact you this week if that's the way you prefer to do it. Either way, let us celebrate you. And thank you for being here today. We hope you'll come back and bring a friend next week as we close out this series. We'll see you then.